The knock came at 2 a.m., sharp and desperate, shattering the silence of my small, creaky house in suburban Ohio. I stumbled out of bed, heart pounding, half expecting a neighbor's emergency burst pipe. A lost dog. Instead, it was Ethan, my neighbor of 3 years, standing on my porch with eyes that looked like they'd seen a ghost. "James, I need your help," he whispered, his voice raw, like he'd been crying or screaming or both. His blonde hair was a mess, his leather jacket zipped tight against the October chill. I barely knew him beyond polite waves and the occasional chat about yard work, but something in his facey, a mix of fear and resolve, pulled me in. I opened the door wider. "What's going on? Man, you okay?" He hesitated, clutching a worn journal like it was his lifeline. "I need you to hold on to this for me. And I need you to pretend you're my boyfriend. Just for a little while." I froze, my sleep-fogged brain scrambling to process. Ethan, the guy who mowed his lawn with military precision, who always seemed so private, was asking May, a 32-year-old high school teacher with zero social libido, fake a relationship. I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but his eyes didn't waver. They were wide, pleading, and something else terrified. "Ethan, what the hell are you talking about?" I asked, stepping onto the porch, the cold wood biting my bare feet. "Why would you need that?" He glanced over his shoulder, like someone might be watching from the dark street. "I can't explain now. Not here. But it's important. James. Life or death important." His voice cracked, and I saw his hands tremble as he shoved the journal toward me. "Please. Just trust me." I took the journal, its leather cover soft and frayed under my fingers. I didn't know why I said yes. Maybe it was the way his voice broke, or the way his eyes held mine like I was his only hope. But I nodded, and that single choice set off a chain of events that would unravel everything I thought I knew about love, courage, and the secrets we keep. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, the journal unopened in front of me, its weight heavier than it should have been. Ethan's request played on a loop in my mind. Pretend to be his boyfriend. The idea was absurd. I was just James Carter, a guy who graded history essays, drank too much coffee, and hadn't dated anyone since a disastrous breakup 2 years ago. I wasn't exactly the poster child for romance, fake or otherwise. But Ethan's fear had been real. I'd seen it in the way his shoulders hunched, the way he kept glancing at the shadows. I sipped my coffee, staring at the journal. What was in it? Why was it so important? And why me? Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Can we talk? Meet me at the park by the lake. Noon." No explanation. No details. I typed a quick sure and spent the next 2 hours pacing, the journal burning a hole in my thoughts. The park was quiet when I arrived, the lake reflecting a gray October sky. Ethan was already there, sitting on a bench, his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. He looked older than his 35 years, lines etched around his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. When he saw me, he stood, offering a small, nervous smile. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice softer now, less frantic. "And last night. I know it sounds crazy." "Crazy's one word for it," I said, sitting beside him. "Ethan, you gotta give me something. Why do you need me to pretend to be your boyfriend? What's going on?" He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the water. "It's about my family. My dad. Mostly. He's not a good man. James. He's powerful, connected, and he's coming here tomorrow. If he finds out I'm alone, he paused, swallowing hard, that I'm gay, he'll destroy me." The word hung between us, heavy and raw. I'd never asked Ethan about his personal life. It wasn't my place. But now, hearing it, I felt a pang of something I couldn't name. Sympathy. Connection. I wasn't sure. Destroy you how? I asked, leaning closer. Ethan's jaw tightened. He's got money. Influence. He runs a big real estate firm in Chicago. And he's got this image to uphold. If he knows I'm not what he wants, he'll cut me off. Not just money, everything. My job. My home. My life here. He's done it before. To my brother. Your brother? I asked. My curiosity piqued. Ethan's eyes darkened. Yeah. Caleb. He came out 10 years ago. Dad disowned him. Ruined his career. Made sure he had nothing. Last I heard, Caleb was living in a shelter in Seattle. His voice broke. And he looked away, blinking hard. I can't let that happen to me. Not now. I didn't know what to say. The weight of his words settled over me, heavy as the journal in my bag. So, you want me to, what? Pretend we're together to keep your dad off your back. Exactly, Ethan said, turning to me. He's coming to check on me, to make sure I'm living right. If he thinks I'm in a stable relationship with someone like you, someone respectable, a teacher might back off. At least for now. I raised an eyebrow. Someone like me. He flushed, a faint pink creeping up his neck. You know what I mean. You're solid, grounded, the kind of guy people trust. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a polite way of calling me boring, but I let it slide. And the journal? I asked, patting my bag. Ethan's face tightened. It's insurance. If something happens to me, it's got everything you need to know. But don't read it. Not unless I tell you to. The secrecy should have made me back out. But something about Ethan, his vulnerability, his quiet strength kept me hooked. I nodded. Okay. I'm in. But you owe me a hell of an explanation when this is over. He smiled. A real one this time. And for a moment, I saw the man behind the fear warm. Grateful. And maybe a little broken. Deal, he said. That night, I lay awake. The journal on my nightstand like a ticking bomb. Ethan's story didn't add up, not completely. Why was his dad so controlling? What was in that journal that was so dangerous? And why did I feel this pull toward him? This need to help. When I barely knew the guy. The next day, Ethan came over to prep me. We sat on my couch, going over the details of our fake relationship, how we met at a neighborhood barbecue. How long we'd been together, 6 months. Our favorite date spots, a diner downtown. It was surreal. Building a lie with someone who felt so real. Every time our eyes met, I felt a spark. Something I hadn't felt in years. You're good at this, Ethan said, grinning as I recounted our fake first date. Maybe you should have been an actor. Maybe, I said, laughing. But you're dodging the hard stuff. What's your dad like? What am I walking into? His grin faded. He's intense. Richard Hawthorne. Old school. Conservative. Thinks he owns everyone. He'll probably grill you about your job. Your politics. Just don't let him get under your skin. I nodded. But my stomach twisted. This wasn't just about playing a part. It was about stepping into Ethan's world. A world that sounded darker and more dangerous than I'd imagined. By the time we finished, it was late. Ethan stood to leave, but he paused at the door, his hand on the knob. James, he said, his voice soft. Thank you. Really. I know this is a lot. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. What are neighbors for? He smiled, and for a second, I thought he might say something else. But he just nodded and stepped into the night, leaving me with a racing heart and 1,000 questions. The morning of Richard Hawthorne's visit arrived like a storm cloud over our quiet street. I woke to the sound of Ethan's lawnmower, a nervous habit he'd picked up, cutting grass that didn't need cutting. I watched him from my window, his movements tense, mechanical, like he was trying to outrun something. I dressed carefully khakis, a button-down shirt, nothing too flashy. Respectable, Ethan had said. I wasn't sure if I was dressing for his dad or for him. The journal sat untouched on my nightstand, tempting me every time I passed it. I wanted to crack it open, to understand what I was really getting into. But I'd promised Ethan. For now, that was enough. At noon, a sleek black SUV pulled into Ethan's driveway. A man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair and a suit that screamed money. Richard Hawthorne. Even from my porch, I could feel the weight of his presence, like he owned the air itself. Ethan greeted him, his posture stiff, his smile forced. I took a deep breath and walked over, my heart hammering. "Dad, this is James," Ethan said, his voice steady but strained. "My boyfriend." Richard's eyes flicked to me, sharp and assessing, like a hawk sizing up prey. "James," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, almost painful. "Richard Hawthorne. Pleasure." "Likewise," I said, matching his stare. I wasn't sure what I'd expected an ogre. Maybe, but Richard was polished, charming even, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We sat in Ethan's living room, a space I'd only glimpsed through windows. It was sparse, practical, with a single framed photo of a younger Ethan and another man, his brother, Caleb, maybe, on a shelf. Richard dominated the room, his questions coming fast and pointed. What did I do? How long had we been together? What were my intentions with his son? I stuck to our script, weaving in details about our fake dates, our fake life. Ethan chimed in, his hand brushing mine once, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through me. I told myself it was just part of the act, but my pulse didn't agree. Richard leaned back, sipping coffee Ethan had made. "You're a teacher," he said, his tone neutral but probing. "History, right? Noble profession. Low pay, though." I shrugged, keeping my voice even. "It's not about the money. It's about the kids." He nodded, but his eyes narrowed, like he was filing away every word. "And you too. You're serious?" "Very," Ethan said, his voice firm. He reached for my hand again, this time holding it, his fingers warm and steady. I didn't pull away. The conversation shifted to Ethan's Joba project manager for a construction firm. Apparently, and Richard's tone grew sharper. "You're wasting your potential. Ethan, you could be running my firm by now, not playing house in this suburb." Ethan's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. I squeezed his hand. "A silent I've got you." He glanced at me, gratitude flickering in his eyes. Dinner was tense, a catered affair Richard insisted on, as if Ethan's cooking wouldn't measure up. Every bite felt like a test, every glance from Richard a challenge. By the time he left, citing a hotel in town, I was exhausted, and Ethan looked like he'd run a marathon. "You okay?" I asked, helping him clear the table. He nodded, but his hands shook as he stacked plates. "He's worse than I remembered. Always pushing, always judging." "Why do you let him get to you?" I asked, leaning against the counter. "You're 35. You've got your own life." Ethan laughed, bitter. "You don't know my dad. He doesn't just judge. He destroys." I wanted to press, to ask about Caleb, about the journal, but Ethan's eyes were so raw, so tired. I couldn't. Instead, I touched his shoulder. You did good tonight. We pulled it off. He looked at me, his expression softening. You were amazing. James. I owe you. I smiled, ignoring the warmth spreading through me. Just don't make me do it again tomorrow. He laughed, and for the first time, it felt real. Over the next few days, Richard lingered, popping in unannounced, his questions growing more invasive. Ethan and I spent more time together, perfecting our act, but the lines were blurring. The way he'd laugh at my dumb jokes, the way his hand lingered on my night felt less like pretending and more like something I didn't dare name. One night, after Richard left, Ethan invited me over for a beer. We sat on his couch, the TV on low, some old movie neither of us was watching. You ever think about getting out? He asked suddenly. Leaving this town? Starting over? I shrugged. Sometimes. But I like my life here. It's quiet. Safe. He nodded, staring at his beer. Safe sounds nice. I haven't felt safe in a long time. The words hung there, heavy. I wanted to ask what he meant, but he changed the subject, telling me about a project he was managing, a new community center downtown. His eyes lit up when he talked about it, and I realized how little I knew about him, how much I wanted to know. As I left, he walked me to the door, his hand brushing mine again. Thanks for sticking with this, he said. I know it's weird. It's not that weird, I said, grinning. Kind of fun, actually. He smiled, and for a moment, I thought he might lean closer. But he just nodded, and I stepped into the night, my heart racing for reasons I wasn't ready to face. A week into Richard's visit, the cracks started to show. Ethan was fraying, his smiles forced, his eyes darting to his phone every time it buzzed. Richard's presence was a constant pressure, like a storm that wouldn't break. I caught myself watching Ethan more closely, noticing the way he flinched when his dad's name came up, the way he'd stare out his window late at night, lost in thought. One afternoon, while Richard was at a meeting, Ethan showed up at my door, his face pale. Can we talk? He asked, his voice tight. I let him in, and we sat at my kitchen table, the journal between us like an unspoken question. What's wrong? I asked. Did something happen? He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes distant. Dad's digging. He's asking around about us. About you. I think he knows something's off. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Digging. He's got people, Ethan said, his voice low. Private investigators. Contacts. He doesn't trust me. Never has. If he finds out we're lying. He trailed off, his hands clenching into fists. I reached across the table, touching his arm. Hey, we've got this. He's got no proof. Right. Ethan nodded, but he didn't look convinced. I can't lose everything. James. Not again. Again? I asked, leaning closer. What happened before? Ethan, what's he got on you? He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, like he was weighing whether to trust me. Finally, he sighed. Before I moved here, I was in Chicago, working for him. I was engaged to a guy named Mark. Dad found out, and he made sure it ended. Mark left, and I had to start over. That's why I'm here. Why I keep my head down. The confession hit me like a punch. I'd known Ethan was hiding something, but this was a wound, raw and bleeding. I'm sorry, I said, my voice soft. That's awful. He shrugged, but his eyes were wet. It's my life. Always running. Always hiding. I wanted to say something profound, something to ease the pain in his voice. But all I could manage was, "You don't have to hide from me." He looked at me, surprised, and for a moment, the air between us felt charged, like a spark waiting to ignite. Then his phone buzzed, and he flinched, the moment gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ethan's story kept replaying in my head: his dad's control, his lost love, his fear. I stared at the journal, its secrets calling to me. I didn't open it, but the temptation was growing. The next day, Richard invited us to dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown. His treat. It felt like a trap, but Ethan insisted we go. "We can't say no," he said. "It'll look suspicious." The restaurant was all crystal chandeliers and overpriced wine, the kind of place that made me feel like an imposter. Richard was in his element, charming the waiter, ordering for us like we were kids. But his eyes never left us, watching every move, every glance. "So, James," he said, cutting into his steak, "tell me about your family. Any skeletons in the closet?" I laughed, trying to keep it light. "Just the usual. Mom's a retired nurse. Dad's a mechanic. No scandals." He nodded, but his smile was cold. "And you, Ethan? Still keeping secrets from your old man?" Ethan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "No secrets, Dad. Just living my life." Richard's eyes narrowed, and I felt a chill. He knew something, or he suspected it. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of small talk and tension, and by the time we left, I was ready to bolt. In the parking lot, Ethan grabbed my arm, pulling me aside. "He's onto us," he whispered. "I saw him talking to someone on the phone. Someone he called his guy. We need to be careful." I nodded, my mind racing. "What's in the journal, Ethan? If it's that important, maybe I should know." He shook his head, his face pale. "Not yet. If you read it, there's no going back." I wanted to argue, but the fear in his eyes stopped me. Instead, I squeezed his hand, a silent promise to keep playing the part, to keep him safe. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. "Meet me at the community center. 8 p.m. E. No explanation. Just Ethan's scrawled initials. I spent the day distracted. My history classes a blur of half-hearted lectures and curious stares from students who sensed I wasn't myself. The community center was Ethan's project, a half-finished building on the edge of town, all concrete and scaffolding. When I arrived, the place was dark, the only light coming from a single bulb inside. Ethan was there, pacing, his silhouette sharp against the glow. "You okay?" I asked, stepping inside. The air smelled of sawdust and paint. A work in progress, like Ethan himself. He turned, his face drawn. I needed to get away from him. He's been at my house all day, asking questions, poking around. I can't breathe. "James." I stepped closer, my hands in my pockets to keep from reaching for him. What's he looking for? Evidence we're lying. Ethan nodded, his eyes darting to the shadows. He's always been like this. Controlling. Paranoid. But this time, it's different. He's desperate. Like he's running out of time. I frowned. Running out of time for what? Ethan hesitated, then pulled a photo from his pocket, a faded picture of him and Caleb, arms around each other, smiling on a beach. "This is my brother," he said, his voice soft. "Dad's been asking about him, too. I think he's trying to tie up loose ends." "Loose ends?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "Ethan, what's in that journal? You keep dodging, but I'm in this now. I deserve to know." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. Finally, He nodded. Okay. But not here. Come with me. We drove to a diner on the outskirts of town. A greasy spoon with flickering neon signs and a jukebox playing old country songs. We slid into a booth, and Ethan leaned close, his voice low. The journal. It's everything. Letters. Emails. Proof of what my dad's done. Not just to me and Caleb, but to others. Fraud. Blackmail. Worse. If it gets out, he's finished. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Jesus. Ethan. That's huge. Why didn't you tell me? Because it's dangerous, he said, his eyes intense. If he finds out you have it, he'll come for you, too. I leaned back, the weight of it sinking in. So, what's the plan? Keep pretending until he leaves. Ethan shook his head. He won't leave until he's sure I'm under his thumb. But there's more. I got a call from Caleb today. My eyes widened. Your brother. He's okay. Ethan's face softened, but his voice was tight. He's alive. He's been hiding, moving around. He wants to meet, to help me take Dad down. But it's risky. If Dad finds out Caleb's back, he trailed off, his hands shaking. I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. We'll figure it out. Together. He looked at me, his eyes softening. You don't have to do this, James. You could walk away. I shook my head, my heart racing. I'm not going anywhere. That night, we stayed at the diner until it closed, talking about everything and nothing, our fake relationship, our real fears, the lives we wanted but didn't know how to reach. Ethan told me about growing up under Richard's shadow, about Caleb's rebellion, about the man he'd loved and lost. I told him about my own quiet life, my failed relationships, the way I'd always felt like I was waiting for something more. When we finally left, the night air was cold, but Ethan's hand found mine as we walked to my car. It wasn't part of the act this time. It was real, and it scared me as much as it thrilled me. The next day, Ethan was gone. I knocked on his door at dawn, worried after a cryptic text, need to handle something. Stay safe. No answer. No lights on. Panic clawed at me. Had Richard done something? Had Ethan run? I called him, but it went straight to voicemail. I paced my house, the journal in my hands, its secrets screaming to be read. I resisted, but the fear was winning. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I opened the journal. Pages of handwritten notes, printed emails, photocopies of documents, evidence of Richard's crimes, bribes to city officials, forged contracts, threats to employees who got too close to the truth. And there, in Ethan's tight scrawl, a letter to Caleb, dated a year ago. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you. I'm trying to make it right. If I don't make it, this journal is yours. My hands shook as I closed it. Ethan wasn't just hiding from his dada, was planning to take him down. And I was holding the key. I was about to call Ethan again when my phone rang. An unknown number. Hello, I said, my voice tight. James. It's Caleb. The voice was low, urgent, like Ethan's but rougher. I need you to bring the journal. Ethan's in trouble. My heart stopped. Trouble? Where is he? Meet me at the old warehouse on Route 17. 8 p.m. Bring the journal. Don't tell anyone. The line went dead. I stood there, frozen, the journal burning in my hands. This was bigger than I'd imagined, and I was in way over my head. But Ethan needed me. I grabbed my keys and headed out. The warehouse was a crumbling relic, surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusted machinery. I parked a block away, the journal tucked under my jacket. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that made every noise feel like a threat. Caleb was waiting inside, a lean man with Ethan's eyes but a harder edge. His dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "You James?" he asked, his voice gruff. I nodded, holding out the journal. "Where's Ethan?" Caleb took it, flipping through the pages with a grim nod. "He's with Dad. Got picked up this morning. I don't know what Dad knows, but it's bad." "Picked up?" I asked, my stomach lurching. "Like, kidnapped?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Not exactly. Dad's got ways of making people come to him. We need to move fast." He explained the plan used the journal to blackmail Richard, force him to back off Ethan and leave town. It was risky, but Caleb had contacts, people who could get the evidence to the right hands. My role was simple: stick with Caleb, keep up the boyfriend act, and make sure Richard didn't suspect I was involved. We drove to a motel where Caleb was staying, a rundown place with flickering lights and peeling wallpaper. He spread the journal's contents on a table, pointing out key documents. "This one," he said, holding up a letter, "proves Dad bribed a councilman to approve a shady development deal. This could put him away for years." I nodded, but my mind was on Ethan. What if he's hurt? We need to find him. Caleb's eyes softened. "I know. I'm worried, too. But Ethan's tough. He's been through worse." I wasn't so sure. The Ethan I knew was strong, but he was also scared, carrying years of pain. I couldn't shake the image of his trembling hands, his pleading eyes. That night, Caleb got a tip Ethan was at Richard's hotel, a sleek high-rise downtown. We drove there, my heart in my throat. Caleb had a plan, but it was shaky, and I wasn't sure I trusted him. He was too calm, too calculated, like he'd been fighting this war for years. We parked across the street, watching the hotel's glass doors. "Stay here," Caleb said, grabbing the journal. "If I'm not back in an hour, call the police." "No way," I said, grabbing his arm. "I'm coming with you. Ethan's he's important to me." Caleb studied me, then nodded. "All right, but stay close." The hotel lobby was all marble and chandeliers, a world away from our quiet suburb. Caleb moved like he belonged, his confidence masking the tension in his jaw. I followed, feeling like an imposter, the journal heavy in my bag. We took the elevator to the penthouse floor, where Richard was staying. Caleb had a keycard stolen, he admitted, from one of Richard's men. My stomach churned as the doors slid open, revealing a long hallway with a single door at the end. Caleb knocked, his face blank. The door opened, and there was Richard, his silver hair gleaming under the lights, his eyes cold as ever. "Caleb," he said, his voice smooth but dangerous. "And, James. What a surprise." "Where's Ethan?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I'd intended. Richard's smile didn't falter. "Inside. Come in." We stepped into a suite that screamed wealth plush carpets, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the city skyline. Ethan was there, sitting on a couch, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He looked up, his eyes wide with relief and fear. "James." I started toward him, but Richard raised a hand. "Not so fast. Let's talk." Caleb held up the journal, his voice steady. "We've got everything. Dad. The bribes. The threats. The deals. Let Ethan go, or this goes public." Richard's eyes narrowed, but he didn't flinch. "You think you can threaten me? After everything I've done for you?" "For us." Caleb spat. You ruined my life. You're trying to ruin Ethan's. This ends now. Ethan stood, his voice shaking but firm. Dad, stop. I don't want your money, your company, any of it. I just want to live my life. Richard's face darkened. Your life? You think you can just walk away? You're my son. You don't get to choose. I stepped forward, my anger boiling over. He's not your property. None of us are. Richard's eyes flicked to me, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his composure. You, he said, his voice low. You're in over your head. Teacher, you have no idea what you're involved in. Maybe not, I said, my voice steady. But I know Ethan's worth fighting for. The room went silent, the weight of my words hanging between us. Ethan looked at me, his eyes shining with something I couldn't name. Caleb stepped forward, holding the journal like a weapon. Let him go, Dad, or I send this to every news outlet in the country. Richard stared at us, his jaw tight. Finally, he laughed. A cold, hollow sound. You think you've won. This isn't over. But he stepped aside, and Ethan rushed to me, his arms wrapping around me in a hug that felt like coming home. Thank you, he whispered, his voice breaking. We left the hotel, the journal still in Caleb's hands, Ethan's arm around my shoulders. Outside, the night air was sharp, but it felt like freedom. Caleb drove us back to the suburb, his eyes on the road, his silence heavy. You okay? I asked Ethan, sitting beside him in the back seat. He nodded, his hand finding mine. I am now. Thanks to you. Caleb glanced at us in the rearview mirror. You too. You're not just pretending, are you? I felt my face heat up, but Ethan just smiled, squeezing my hand. Maybe not, he said softly. The next week was a blur of planning and paranoia. Caleb sent copies of the journal's contents to a lawyer he trusted, someone who could get the evidence to the authorities without implicating us. Ethan stayed at my place, too shaken to go home, his dad's threat echoing in our minds. This isn't over. We spent hours talking, peeling back layers of each other's lives. Ethan told me about his dreams of opening a community center, a safe space for kids like he'd been scared, hiding who they were. I told him about my fear of being alone, of never finding someone who saw me, really saw me. The more we talked, the more the lines between our fake relationship and something real blurred. One night, as we sat on my couch, Ethan turned to me, his eyes soft. James, why did you do this? You could have walked away. I looked at him, my heart pounding. Because I care about you. More than I expected. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. I care about you, too. The kiss was tentative at first, like we were both afraid to break something fragile. But then it deepened, and it was like the world fell away, leaving just us two people who'd found each other in the chaos. Richard didn't give up. He called Ethan daily, leaving voicemails that started polite and turned menacing. Come back to Chicago. Don't make me come for you. Ethan deleted them, but I saw the toll they took. The way his hands shook every time his phone buzzed. Caleb was relentless, working his contacts, pushing the evidence forward. One morning, he showed up at my house, his face grim. It's done, he said. The feds have the journal. They're looking into Dad's deals. Ethan's eyes widened. What does that mean for us? It means he's going down, Caleb said. But we need to lay low. He's not stupid. He'll fight back. That night, Ethan and I sat on my porch, watching the stars. What happens now? I asked. He leaned against me, his head on my shoulder. We live. Really live. No more hiding. I smiled, my arm around him. Sounds like a plan. Months later, Richard was indicted. The news broke on a quiet morning. His face splashed across every channel. Real estate mogul faces fraud charges. Ethan watched it unfold on my TV. His face a mix of relief and grief. It's over, he whispered. He can't hurt us anymore. Caleb stayed in town, helping Ethan rebuild. They worked on the community center together, a place for kids to feel safe, to be themselves. I volunteered, too, teaching history workshops, watching Ethan come alive as he mentored kids who reminded him of himself. Our relationship wasn't perfect. There were days when Ethan's fears resurfaced, when my own insecurities got in the way. But we talked. We fought. We loved. And every time he smiled at me, I knew it was worth it. One evening, as we stood in the finished community center, Ethan took my hand. You changed my life, James. That favor, it wasn't just about fooling my dad. It was about finding you. I kissed him, the weight of his words settling in my chest. You changed mine, too. We'd started as neighbors, bound by a desperate favor and a dangerous secret. But we'd become so much more partners, lovers, a team. The journal, now locked away, was a reminder of what we'd overcome, of the courage it took to choose love over fear. As we locked up the center and walked home, hand in hand, I realized something. Sometimes, the most life-changing favors aren't the ones you ask for. They're the ones you give.